It is day 53 of the 1 year fast. Today is a non-fasting day. So I've had some food today, probably more than I should have had. Also last night when I broke the fast, I actually did the typical, had my plant-based protein smoothie with spirulina and some blueberries. This particular week, past few days, not felt 100%. Bit of congestion, probably down to allergies. Also in my lower lumbar region, there's a twinge. So I'm not working out. And that always affects me in a negative way when I can't work out. So overall, feeling okay, but not 100%. Also thinking about my consumption. So today I noticed I'm going back and eating seconds. Which brings us to the topic of rebound in fasting. So when you fast for, it could even just be 1 day, you have this compulsion, or some people have a compulsion to then compensate for those lack of calories by eating more on the day after a fast. And obviously, the longer you fast, the more likely you are to rebound and try to compensate. I always try to be mindful of that fact and try to avoid it. However, I did notice that today, after that 48-hour fast, I was rebounding. I was compensating. So as I say, going back for seconds, grazing a bit more than I would typically do, not structuring my meals. I do need to be mindful of that fact as I move forward. I can't allow myself to rebound post a fast and overcompensate by eating more calories after the fast. So not feeling 100%, but still feeling well, feeling good. I can't complain. Just a small congestion, little twinge in the lower lumbar, but overall feeling pretty good. So on the topic of well-being, of course, as I've shared in the past, one of the main purposes of these videos is to act as a record, as a library, to try and discern some mental, emotional, psychological, spiritual indicators as I work through the fast. Because clearly, fasting is much more than just food consumption. It really is an holistic experience. And so I want to measure that holistically. I want to measure, of course, all of the underlying physical indicators, but then on top of that, I want to layer those emotional, psychological, mental, spiritual indicators. I feel they're just as important, if not more important than the physical. So that said, thinking today. So I've worked for 29 individual companies throughout my life, but most of my life I've been self-employed. So that 29 companies really is just a short period of time, around about 20 years. And I shared that early on I worked as a commodity broker near Finsbury Square in London. I then used to go over to Spitalfields, the old Spitalfields in London before they moved it out to the Hackney Marshes. And then I got a job on Nine Elms in the new Covent Garden, not the old Covent Garden. I missed that boat. I'd love to have worked in the old Covent Garden, but I didn't. I worked at Nine Elms, and I used to do that really early morning run across London. I used to start work at 3 a.m. in the morning, so I'd leave home around about 2:15, 2:30, drive from the east end of London across the river into Nine Elms over by Battersea. So I did that, and then I got a job working in the city as a data analyst, a Eurobond data analyst. I did that for a few years, became really, disconcerted, a little bit, depressed in a way. And I just decided to look for a new path. So I moved from London and I went into Cambridgeshire and Lincolnshire. And then I had a whole myriad of jobs, mostly working for other people before I became self-employed. First time I became self-employed was in the 90s. But one area I did work is, so when I arrived in Lincolnshire, in Boston in Lincolnshire, I worked on the Boston dock, and that was a really interesting job. So my job there was as a hand on the dock, helping with the loading and unloading of the ships with grain. So the whole of Boston and the surrounding area, they do lots of, they grow all of the wheat, all of the different types of grains around the area because it's so flat and so fertile. They bring all that grain into the silos within Boston Dock, and then it goes along these conveyors, and you have a long pipe from the conveyors that you basically control with a remote control, and you jet the grain into the ship. And I remember doing that. I was only there for about less than 6 months, and I remember doing that, and it was an interesting job. There's some interesting characters there, and both on shore and those that came off the boats. Very, very interesting characters. So I was there for about 6 months, but just in a short period of time after that, I then went to work in Fleetwood in Lancashire on the Fleetwood dock. So I saw the dock in Boston on the east coast of England, and then I went to work on the dock in Fleetwood on the west coast of England. And there I was, when I was over on the Fleetwood dock, I was working for a company that produced telegraph poles. So the wooden telegraph poles would be brought in primarily from Finland, also from Canada, some Douglas fir timber, and the telegraph poles would be prepared within the dock area. They would be incised with holes and then creosoted to make them, saturated to ensure their longevity was maximized. And so whilst I was working on the Fleetwood dock, that was really interesting too. Again, some pretty interesting characters, both on shore and that came in on the boats. And I do recall when I was on the Fleetwood dock, I would go out occasionally with the lorry driver, with the HGV driver, who would take these long poles from the dock area out across the northwest of England. And so they would be delivering the telegraph poles across the northwest of England into northern Wales. So everywhere across the Pennines, Keighley and places like that within the Western Pennines, and then into the city areas, and then into places like the south of the Lake District, into Morecambe, and as I say, across into northern Wales. And that was really interesting. So when we delivered the poles to North Wales, there was one of the electric boards had on staff an archer, like Robin Hood. And their job was they would tie a certain twine to an arrow and would fire the arrow over a valley so that they could pull the wires across between the poles. It felt almost surreal when they did that. So I worked in 2 docks, one on the east coast in Boston, agricultural, and then one on the west coast in Fleetwood, which was focused on telegraph poles. Both very, very interesting places. And of course, I used to commute across M62 from northwest into the Doncaster area in the east, then drive down to Nottingham, and then drive across through the fens into Boston at least a few times a month. And I do remember one journey I did across the Pennines on the M62, and on the news, this was 1989, and I remember I had a really old Ford Cortina that I was driving across the Pennines on the M62, and I was listening to the radio, and they just announced the breaking down of the Berlin Wall. And obviously there was lots of celebration. People were taking pieces of the wall as mementos. And I think you occasionally see those on eBay. And it just got me thinking as I'm driving across the M62 about the Berlin Wall and how the separation of East and West had occurred. And I saw the correlation on the M62 about the separation of North and South England, or North and South Britain, and how it kind of, in a really abstract way, aligned with the destruction of the Berlin Wall. So two more jobs that I've undertaken over the years, working on the docks. I did enjoy them. Okay, so again, day 53 of the 1 year fast. Today is a non-fasting day. As I mentioned, I am definitely rebounding. I am overcompensating for the loss of calories. I'm definitely going to keep an eye on that one to make sure I don't do that. And yeah, I'm going to step into a 24-hour fast tomorrow, and that will be my last fast for week 8. And again, my weeks go from Sunday through to Saturday. Next week, I am thinking I will probably fast on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So a 72-hour fast next week. And then once I get to about hour 70 or so, I'll then take my ketone readings with both the breath-based ketone reader and also the blood-based ketone reader, and hopefully see some meaningful numbers. Fingers crossed. Okay, so that's me for day 53 of the 1 year fast. Thank you.